History is filled with questions that refuse to die. But few have haunted the world quite like this one. Did Adolf Hitler actually die in that Berlin bunker on April 30th, 1945? Or did the most wanted man in human history somehow slip through the fingers of every intelligence agency on Earth and vanish into the shadows of another continent? For decades, the official answer has been simple and clean. He shot himself, his body was burned, and the war criminal met the end he deserved. But clean answers have a way of unraveling when new evidence surfaces, and what researchers discovered buried deep inside a jungle cave in South America has torn that clean answer completely apart. This is not a fringe conspiracy theory whispered in dark corners of the internet. This is a story built on declassified FBI documents, peer-reviewed forensic studies, archaeological discoveries made by credentialed university teams, and physical artifacts that should not exist if the official timeline is accurate. When you line all of these pieces up side by side, a deeply unsettling picture begins to form, one that suggests the final chapter of World War II may have been written somewhere very different from where history books have always claimed. To understand why this cave matters so much, you first need to understand exactly how shaky the foundation of the official story really is. The accepted account tells us that by late April 1945, Adolf Hitler was cornered inside his underground command post in Berlin, known as the Führerbunker, as Soviet forces closed in from every direction. The city above him was being reduced to rubble. His military was destroyed. His inner circle was collapsing. On April 30th, 1945, he allegedly married his companion Eva Braun, said his farewells to remaining staff, retreated into a private room, and ended his own life with a gunshot to the head while Eva Braun took a cyanide capsule. Loyal staff members then carried both bodies to the garden above, doused them in gasoline, and set them alight. When Soviet forces arrived and searched the area, they claimed to recover charred human remains, including a skull fragment with a bullet hole and a jawbone they identified as Hitler's. For decades, these physical items were held in Russian state archives as the definitive proof that the dictator was dead. Case closed, the world was told, except it was never really closed. The first massive crack in this story appeared in 2009, when scientists from the University of Connecticut were granted rare access to that famous skull fragment, the one the Soviet government had long presented as Hitler's. The DNA results were unambiguous and stunning. The skull did not belong to Adolf Hitler. It belonged to a woman, most likely between the ages of 40 and 45. This was not a minor discrepancy. This was the complete demolition of the primary physical evidence supporting the official account. If the skull was not his, then what exactly did the Soviets recover? And more importantly, why had they been presenting a woman's skull as proof of a man's death for over 60 years? The dental evidence fared no better under scrutiny. Researchers who studied the Soviet documentation of Hitler's teeth found that the descriptions of his dental structure changed multiple times between 1945 and 1968. Details were added, altered, and revised in ways that strongly suggest the record was being actively maintained rather than simply preserved. Physical evidence does not change over time. Written descriptions of physical evidence, however, can be quietly adjusted by people who need a story to hold together. Then, in 1970, came perhaps the most suspicious decision of all. The Soviet government quietly exhumed the remains they had secretly buried years earlier and ordered them to be incinerated completely. The ashes were scattered into a river. There was no scientific review, no independent verification, no preservation for future study. The only physical evidence of Hitler's death was deliberately and permanently destroyed by the one government that had always controlled access to it. For any investigator worth their credentials, that single act raises more questions than all the conspiracy theories combined. While the Soviets were managing their evidence in Europe, something remarkable was happening on the other side of the Atlantic. The Nazi regime had spent years building what became known as Ratlins, sophisticated escape networks designed to move high-ranking party members out of Europe and into safer territory if the war was lost. These were not improvised last-minute plans. They were carefully constructed systems involving forged documents, sympathetic governments, religious institutions that were later found to have been compromised, and a series of safe houses stretching from Germany through Spain, Portugal, and across the ocean to South America. The maritime component of this network was particularly striking. In the weeks and months following Germany's surrender, 2 German submarines, U-530 and U-977, surfaced off the Argentine coast near the port city of Mar del Plata. Their appearance baffled the international community. The war was over. German naval forces had surrendered. Yet here were 2 fully operational submarines arriving in South American waters months after the conflict had ended. When Argentine naval officers boarded and searched the vessels, they found something deeply troubling. The logbooks had been stripped clean. Every record of where the submarines had traveled, what routes they had taken, and what or whom they had been carrying had been removed with deliberate precision. The cargo holds were completely empty. Intelligence agencies on multiple continents took notice. Declassified files that became available through Freedom of Information requests in the United States reveal that the FBI under Director J. Edgar Hoover was receiving active intelligence reports about high-value German passengers being transported to South America during this period. These were not casual rumors that Hoover dismissed. His office kept investigation files related to Hitler's potential survival active for years, in some cases decades, after the war had officially ended. A man as cautious and skeptical as Hoover does not keep active files on something he privately considers nonsense. Argentine coastal police were also filing reports during this period that described unmarked rubber boats making night landings on isolated stretches of the Patagonian coastline. These landings were coordinated, disciplined, and clearly not the work of ordinary civilians. They were the kind of precision operations that required military training, local support networks, and advanced planning. Someone was moving people into Argentina in a deliberate and professional way, and they were doing everything possible to ensure no record of it survived. This brings us to the discovery that has reignited the entire debate with a force that the academic community cannot simply dismiss. In 2015, an archaeological research team from the University of Buenos Aires, led by historian and archaeologist Daniel Shavelson, was conducting fieldwork in the Misiones province of Argentina, a dense jungle region near the point where Argentina, Brazil, and Paraguay meet. They were investigating potential hideouts connected to Nazi war criminals who had fled to South America after the war. What they found exceeded anything they had anticipated. Deep in the jungle, buried under decades of tropical vegetation and completely invisible from the air, they uncovered a stone complex of remarkable construction. The walls were nearly a meter thick and built using European stone masonry techniques that had no business being in the middle of a South American rainforest. The architectural style was distinctly Germanic. The craftsmanship was precise, deliberate, and expensive. Whoever built this structure had access to serious resources and the skilled labor to use them effectively. The location itself appeared to have been chosen with strategic intelligence in mind. Positioned near the triple border junction, anyone sheltering here could cross into 2 other sovereign nations within a matter of hours if authorities came looking. It was, as Shavelson and his team noted in their reports, the kind of location that a security-conscious fugitive would select. Maximum escape options, minimum visibility, and natural jungle cover that had taken decades to develop undisturbed. As the team moved deeper into the complex, they discovered that the stone buildings were connected to something far more significant. A man-made cave, reinforced and carved directly into the bedrock. This was not a natural formation that had been repurposed. This was an engineered structure, built to withstand serious external force, and designed to function as a long-term habitation rather than a temporary shelter. Inside the cave, the research team began recovering artifacts that told a remarkable story about who had lived there and how they had lived. German coins dated between 1938 and 1944 were found throughout the space. Fragments of high-quality Meissen porcelain, the kind of fine European tableware associated with wealthy households and certainly not common soldier field equipment, were recovered from multiple locations within the cave. Specialized German medical supplies were also present, the type used for long-term medical management rather than battlefield emergency care. Taken individually, each of these finds could perhaps be explained away. Taken together, they paint a portrait of a high-ranking individual who expected to live in considerable comfort for an extended period. who brought the luxuries of an elevated European lifestyle into a hidden jungle bunker, and who had the resources and the network to make that happen. This was not a soldier on the run. This was a powerful person in deliberate, well-resourced hiding. The cave discovery does not exist in isolation. It exists in direct tension with the most thorough forensic examination of the dental evidence ever conducted. In 2018, the Russian government made an unprecedented decision and granted access to the teeth and jaw fragments long held in their archives to a team of French forensic specialists led by Professor Philippe Charlier, a researcher renowned internationally for his work applying modern forensic methods to historical cold cases. Charlier's team conducted a meticulous analysis. They found a distinctive blue discoloration in the tartar deposits on the dental bridges, a chemical signature produced when metal reacts with cyanide compounds. This was consistent with cyanide ingestion at the time of death. They found no trace of meat fiber in the dental work, which aligned with documented accounts of Hitler's strict vegetarianism. The dental structures themselves, when compared against wartime dental records, showed a high degree of correspondence. Charlier publicly concluded that the teeth were those of Adolf Hitler and that he died in Berlin in 1945. This creates the central paradox at the heart of the entire mystery. If the forensic science confirms death in Berlin, why does a reinforced jungle bunker filled with German luxury goods exist thousands of miles away? The two realities cannot both be fully true in the way each individually suggests. Several serious researchers have proposed what they call the double theory, the idea that a body double was used to provide physical evidence of death while the real individual escaped. It is documented historical fact that Hitler used body doubles for security purposes during the war. It is also documented that the Nazi regime was sophisticated in deception operations. A dental swap, removing dental work from a living person and placing it in the mouth of a prepared corpse, would represent exactly the kind of methodical, long-term deception that Nazi intelligence was known to execute. If this occurred, then the French study confirmed the authenticity of the dental work without confirming the identity of the body it came from. This remains an open question that forensic science alone cannot resolve. Beyond the physical evidence lies a question of character and psychology. Would Adolf Hitler, given everything we know about how he thought and what he believed about himself, have chosen suicide in a basement over escape and potential return? Those who have studied his psychology extensively describe a man with an unshakable belief in his own historical destiny. He studied Napoleon obsessively, particularly the episode of Napoleon's exile to Elba and his dramatic return to power. Hitler believed deeply that great leaders were not defined by single defeats, but by their ability to recover and strike again. He believed he was a messianic figure whose mission was not yet complete. He was also, by multiple accounts, terrified of being captured by Soviet forces and displayed publicly as a trophy of their victory. A man with that psychology, facing that specific fear, with access to a global escape network, massive stolen wealth, and loyal followers on the other side of the Atlantic, has very powerful reasons to choose escape over death. The bunker suicide has always required us to believe that Hitler's monumental ego and survival instinct simply switched off at the critical moment. The escape theory requires us to believe those same well-documented traits remained entirely consistent with his lifetime behavior. The Misiones cave sits empty today, its secrets partially surrendered to a research team that stumbled upon it 80 years after the war ended. What it represents goes beyond one man's potential survival. It is physical proof that the Nazi escape network was real, functional, well-funded, and capable of maintaining hidden infrastructure in remote locations for decades without detection. Whether Adolf Hitler personally lived in that cave, used it as a transit point, or never set foot inside it at all, the structure's existence confirms that the official story of a clean, documented death in Berlin was always incomplete. Intelligence agencies knew about these networks while publicly assuring the world the matter was settled. Documents were classified for over 70 years. Physical evidence was destroyed by the one government that controlled it. The full truth of what happened after April 30th, 1945, may never be completely recovered. But the cave in the jungle, the FBI files that stayed open for decades, the skull that belonged to a woman, and the dental records locked in a Moscow vault together demand one thing above all else: that we stop treating this as a closed case and start treating it as the unresolved historical question it has always been.